Welcome back. It's Bryon
and Brandi.
What's the Business? On What's the Business, we discuss aspects of business. On weeks when we don't have guests, we will sit down and talk about different marketing concepts and things along those lines. When we do have guests who are heads of organizations or business owners or independent contractors, we are going to ask what's the business with their business and try to get into what makes their business unique and what makes it tick. So today's episode, one that's close to my heart, but we're going to talk about why business owners need to get out here and take advantage of the free terrain.
That is podcasting.
I'm sorry, I got a little bit tongue-tied. And when we say podcasting, we're going to be talking about audio and video podcasting. I'll define the two, explain the similarities and differences in this program. That's what's on What's the Business today. We will get to you after the intro. Peace. What's the business, y'all? It is Bryon and Brandi, and we're back. Thanks for tuning in. This is like episode 4 now.
4 is fun.
Yeah. And
couldn't think of anything.
Right. So what we're going to get into, and we're going to keep it brief, but hopefully we keep it moving and informative. We're going to talk about why podcasting is such an open range or open area. There's going to be a lot of business owners that can fit in this area and really take advantage of the marketing opportunities that podcasting avails to you. And really, it can be a secret weapon in your marketing kit. And that's what we wanted to talk about, why small business owners and organizations, we're not leaving out nonprofits, why y'all need to be out here with a podcast. And of course, we're going to plug our services because we can help you get started. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So,
Bryon.
Yes.
Can I ask the question?
Yes, go for it.
Bryon.
Yes.
What is podcast in the broadest of terms?
All right, in the broadest terms, podcasting, if we're talking about podcasting, it's basically having your own channel. Now, when I say your own channel, this goes back, it depends on how old you are. If you grew up with radio, it's basically like having your own radio station where you control the guests, you control the content, what's being said, you control the advertisement, the products you present, and the range of topics. You really get to control your own narrative in a podcast. And so we see a lot of talking heads doing podcasts and building entire platforms off of giving their opinions, whether you agree with them or disagree with them. That's what their podcast is built on, is, having a curated audience. And we're going to talk about the importance of having that curated audience in a second. Now, when Brandi asks podcast, it's kind of open-ended because there are multiple types of podcasts you can do. You can do the more narrative ones. You can do like the true crime ones that Brandi loves.
I love true crime.
She loves the true crime podcast.
Can I give a shout out to my favorite one right now? I love Sisters Who Kill. Shout out to Mara and Taz. I love you guys.
She likes Sisters Who Kill. I'm into the You Are Not So Smart podcast, which is Dave McRaney, where he talks about cognitive science and new developments in cognitive science. Really fascinating stuff. And his is in the form of interviews with professors and cognitive scientists explaining different ways that our brains aren't infallible. And ways our brains can be susceptible to logical fallacies. It's really a great one. I also listen to a bunch of pro wrestling podcasts because in my other life, I am a nerd. So, I'm just fascinated by listening to old stories of older wrestlers traveling on the road and stuff like that. So those are the podcasts I'm into.
And then in my nerd space is crafty things. I love doing crafts like dot painting and calligraphy and quilling, paper quilling. Those are just some of the little crafty things that I like to watch on my nerd side.
Well, and I want to clarify up front here. When I say podcast, I'm going to be using podcasts and video podcasts pretty interchangeably because the concept is the same. The method to deliver them isn't exactly the same, but it's kind of similar. So when I say video podcasts, those will be the ones that you see on YouTube. Sometimes people will just they'll make videos, they'll make audiograms, which is basically a video of the audio where they have a little waveform in the animation, or it's just a static image and the audio's behind it. But they'll either do that or they will record themselves doing their podcast show and post that on YouTube. And that's a powerful way. And YouTube is so powerful. In fact, YouTube is, I think, the third largest provider. And unintentionally, because they even mentioned this, they didn't really intend to be in the space, but they are the third largest platform for podcasts. People post their podcasts on YouTube all the time, and now YouTube is starting to wrap their arms around it and actually giving podcasters some tools on their platform to create podcasts and post directly to them. So it's a growing space. That's pretty cool. It is, and it's a growing space. So when I say podcast, I'm talking about audio podcasts and video podcasts. I'm using those interchangeably. So understand if I start talking, it sounds video centric, understand I'm talking about the video side of things. If it sounds like audio centric, then I'm talking about the audio side of things.
But for the most part, you're talking in a broad concept of podcasts in general, correct, Bryon?
Correct. Absolutely correct. Now, what space is there for business owners? Why would a business owner want a podcast?
Why would a business owner want a podcast?
That's a fantastic question, dear. A business owner will want a podcast because it allows them to reach out to a committed group of clients who have shown a higher level engagement than just liking a social media post or liking a social media page. They actually want to hear your voice. And it's an opportunity to get new clients, new prospective clients. You can build that level of trust with them without having to really engage with them directly. They listen to your podcast, get good, valuable information that they can use to improve their lives, and they trust you. They build that trust with you. So all you have to do is stick in a call to action, like, if you want us to launch a podcast, email us at mail@isellwords.net. That is mail, MAIL, at isellwords.net.
Link in the show notes.
Links in the show notes. You can put a little call to action in there and get them to reach out to you for the next part of the conversation. So you can bypass that entire having to earn trust and everything because you already demonstrated that you are proficient in what you do, and they like you enough to want to hear your voice and hear what you have to say. And yeah, it sounds strange, but there's a whole subsection of people that are dying to get the inside knowledge on what your industry does because maybe they're trying to buy something, right?
You're right. Or maybe there is a concept that that they can utilize in their everyday life that you can help them put together. So they're interested in wanting to know your products or services.
Right. I mean, if I was like a mechanic or something, or if I was looking for a mechanic or something, and I knew that a mechanic in town had a podcast, I would definitely tune in to hear what their thoughts on things were and see if I kind of like their personality. And it's an easy bridge if I like their personality and they give me good information, it's not hard to pick up that phone and call them if something goes wrong with my car.
Right. So, Bryon.
Yes.
For a small business or a nonprofit, what is the benefit of them creating a podcast?
So let's start with an organization and work backwards.
Okay.
So, like, say you run a nonprofit, right? Mm. Your nonprofit's reasonably sized. You have a staff, right? And you're focused in one specific area that nonprofits kind of reside in. Maybe it's like childcare or something along those lines. Like your childcare agency, right?
Okay.
So in your building, you have experts all over the place. You have questions that parents would ask because invariably, if they're getting family support from you or other things, invariably they need your help and support, right? Your experts can help parents who don't have direct contact with their services figure out either what to do in an emergency situation with the kid, or they know that they can reach out to you for your assistance. But it also is as simple as walking down the hall and saying, you run our therapy wing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I need an expert therapist. Can you come on and talk about this? And you can talk about a specific topic relevant to childhood development. You know, you have a building full of experts. What this does is your donors are going to be listening.
Right.
They're going to be, you know, you never know if you can reach out to that one parent that they have some money to donate, but man, they're really struggling with this kid. All it needs is to hear your voice. All they need to do is hear your voice and, you know, your advice on how to navigate the toughest parts of parenting. And man, they're willing to donate. You got a donor for life if they can help you out. So that's the idea. You have a building full of experts, and all you have to do is just go down and find one. And it allows you to not only grow your donors, but also grow your potential audience, because you're giving information for parents. If you got a foster care program, as you guys know, I used to work in this world. If you got a foster care program, you're constantly trying to find high quality people to do foster care. What if you had an episode that explains a lot of the basic questions that you get about being foster parents with the heads of your foster care program, where you can ask, whether they can answer those questions using their expertise. So it's a very, very kind of powerful tool that you can utilize. And again, it's your messaging. If you got a big event coming up, guess what?
There's your podcast.
You can plug it on your podcast.
Cool. That's cool. So, Bryon, what about someone who's a solopreneur or entrepreneur? How can they utilize podcasting?
This is an opportunity for you to become a thought leader where people pay to hear what you have to say. And they pay with their attention, and they give you attention by subscribing to your podcast. Again, it allows you to really establish yourself as an expert in your field. It allows you to grow a loyal audience who tunes in to hear your voice talk about different things. And then that audience goes out and refers people, say, hey, man, if you're curious about this, you need to listen to this podcast. They really give you some good information. They'll hook you up with other people within their industry, and you're providing them good, solid information. You're going to be top of mind when they're looking for a provider in that specific industry. And so let's say you run an HVAC company and you do a monthly podcast that you update, maybe once a month, and you talk about different topics when it comes to HVAC. You give them some DIY stuff that they can do on their own. And then you tell them ways to fix it if they can do it by themselves, or signs they need to call a technician, right?
Right.
So who are they going to call when they call a technician?
The company that's running the podcast, because
they've already established themselves as somebody that they can trust with good information.
So there's a golden nugget for why you should start a podcast, right? Because you establish yourself as an expert. Right.
What's the one thing? What's one of the things? I know they say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What's one of the things that we learned in our conference down in Vegas? Business owners are not really utilizing the podcast space to their full benefit.
Oh, I don't know. I was about to say, look, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, and I'm not speaking about.
But there's so much open lanes because there's so many entertainment podcasts out there, and podcasts about television shows, and podcasts about politics and things like that. But there's not a lot of podcasts regarding, business owners talking about what their expertise is in. So
what you're saying, Bryon, is there's not a lot of podcasts in specific industries.
Right.
So I can kind of think of a little something here, and tell me if I'm on the wrong or right path with this.
Okay.
Some of the things that I have seen more recently come across, like my YouTube channel, are things where doctors are starting to give points and tips on, or not doctors, chiropractors are giving points and tips on how you can self-adjust yourself. And they show that like on YouTube or, a small little clip like on TikTok. Is that kind of something that someone could do? It doesn't have to be a long episode, like 30, 40 minutes. It can be something short.
Right. You can absolutely do it. And realistically, what a lot of podcasters do is they'll create their content, they'll create their show, and it can be 15 minutes, it can be 5 minutes, it can be an hour, it can be 3 hours. And then they take different segments and spin them off. And so, if you have a segment, that'll be really great for a little snippet that you can post on YouTube, say it's a video podcast specifically. You can cut that little segment out, post on YouTube. If you're a chiropractor, you're showing how people can do adjustments, minor adjustments at home. Of course, there's going to be caveats with it. You're going to make sure that you're saying you need to seek a professional, and hopefully you're the professional they seek. But if it's something minor that they can do safely in their home, you post it online, and now you've helped out a segment of people. And when they're looking for help, who are they going to come to?
You, the chiropractor that put that information out on the podcast because they've subscribed to your channel.
Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to shift the focus a slight bit and talk about the implementation piece of it. And what I've seen in implementation, we'll give you some examples of ways that I've seen it play out and different things that you can absolutely do with the podcast. And then also a small plug for our services. So that's what we'll get to. We'll take a brief pause for the calls and we'll be right back.
So when I wanted to get started in the podcasting game, I was looking at different platforms, and I had done podcasts before, and I was looking at something that would allow me to get started as quickly as possible. Because when you're a small business owner, momentum is everything. Things that allow you to get started without a lot of seams or steps allow you to feel some success early on, and it encourages you to keep pushing through. And that's where Anchor comes in. Anchor is the platform that I use. It's a free platform that gives you all the tools you need to get started with your podcast journey. There's all kinds of creation tools that allow you to edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer, so it's always at your fingertips. And Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other providers. So it allows you to make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And that's huge. That's what I'm talking about with getting that momentum. So if you want to get started and have everything you need to make a podcast in one place, then download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to start your journey. Thanks for tuning in. Back to the show.
Okay, we're back. And before we went to the break, we were talking about, what small businesses and organizations can do, and solopreneurs too, how they can use podcasting to help with their marketing efforts. One piece I left out, when you create podcasts, you create them in episodes. And those episodes live online, wherever you post them. So say you're using a service like Buzzsprout, Buzzsprout will post it on their site, but then they'll also post it on iTunes and Spotify and the other places. What's happening nowadays is Google is cross-referencing podcasts too in its search results. So let's say you do a podcast, you did one 3 years ago about what to do when your check engine light comes on. Okay? People can actually search what to do when my check engine light comes on. And if you're on one of those indexes, if you have maybe your video podcast is on YouTube, maybe your podcast is titled specifically, what to do when your check engine light comes on, Google will actually start pulling those podcast results for you too. And so this podcast that you created 3 or 4 years ago is bringing you another potential client. So as you build more episodes and build a library of content that has good actionable information in it, people are going to find it online, and you'll be surprised at the kind of trails you bring in from people that saw your stuff sitting out there and clicked on it.
Okay. So before we went to break, Bri, you were speaking in regards to implementing a podcast.
Right.
How difficult is it for someone to start a podcast?
Well, it's one of those things where depending on how you want to get in, that's kind of to determine how complex your setup is. Some people are going to want to come in with all the bells and whistles out the gate.
Okay.
And that's fine. That's where you're going to actually be investing in. You're going to be looking for good quality microphones, good quality recording equipment. You're going to want to have a soundproof room and all that other stuff. If you're just looking to get started, and that's kind of where, if you just need something to get started, Anchor is a fantastic app. It's on your phone. You can download it and basically use your phone as a microphone.
Pause. That is a non-sponsored plug. So non-sponsored, non-affiliated. Well,
it might
be affiliated, might be sponsored after this, but for right now.
But Anchor is a fantastic tool to get started. It gives you pretty much everything you need to do a one-man show podcast. And then as you start getting more proficient in it, you start scaling up and you can start adding pieces to it. Because here's the other side. We talk about the podcast money that comes along with it. Your podcast could end up being a stream of money in and of itself. So you got to keep that in mind as you build up an audience and build up listeners. You're going to have people that are within your industry that may want to have you sponsor or talk about their products on your show. Mm-hmm. And that's revenue for you. With things like Buzzsprout and Anchor, you can even record an ad for their service that you're doing. You do the ad, you embed it in there, and you can get paid from that.
Okay.
And so you can get sponsorship from that. And so there's lots of different ways that a business owner can even create a podcast as its own revenue source. But
so let's swing back to the implementation, because we kind of spun off there and went into money generation. I was going to get to that, but since we've already touched it, let's swing back to the implementation piece.
So, really all you need is, we'll say, a room. And here's a perfect example. If you have a walk-in closet with clothes hanging up, you have a good space to record.
My cloffice.
Right. So, you just need a room that has stuff on the walls that can absorb sound, and you have a space to record, and you can use your phone because your phone is a microphone.
What about cars? You see a lot of people recording in their cars. Could they do a podcast recording in your car?
You can do a YouTube and a podcast in your car if you want to.
Okay.
But a car is a good place because it's not echoey. You got the windows rolled up. All the surfaces pretty much are covered in some kind of fabric to absorb that sound. The only thing you would have to make sure of is that you don't have your engine running so you don't get engine noise in the background.
Or not too loudly. We live in the Midwest where it can be -10 1 minute and 80 degrees by the end of the day. So you may have to turn the air or the heat on.
And as you start spending money for equipment, there are plenty of little implements that you can buy that don't cost a ton of money. We're talking about maybe $100-$200 to get you started. So if you want to step it up, you can buy a higher quality microphone. You can buy a one that plugs right into your computer. You can buy, you can step it up a little bit and buy an XLR mic that has a little interface that plugs into your computer. XLR is a different kind of input for a microphone. It gives you a little bit cleaner. It gives you a little bit cleaner sound that you can adjust more than going straight in your computer. But you can do that. You can buy a personal digital recorder, which they sell fantastic digital recorders that act as both an interface that can plug into your computer for an XLR mic, or it can stand alone and record by itself. And it gives you high quality professional grade sound. A lot of professionals will use those handheld recorders out in the field to record interviews and stuff. And Zoom makes a lot of them. Tascam makes some good ones. I have a Tascam little handheld recorder. It sounds as good, if not better, than any microphone that I have in my collection. As you step up, There's also one that I use frequently. It's called a Zoom PodTrack 4. It is a digital recorder that is specifically made for podcasters.
Okay.
So you can plug in, it has four inputs. You can plug in up to 4 microphones into it. Plus, you can plug in a cell phone for phone interviews, and it records everything to a little SD card, and there you go. Now, when I first got it, there was a little glitch, a little bug in it that was fixed with a firmware update, but I mean, it works like a champ now. And so there's plenty of ways to get started. The cheapest way is going to be your phone. But as you start investing more and more time into the quality of your podcast, you're going to want to start improving the quality of your equipment.
Okay. So that is on the lines of the equipment implementation. What about, and well, you kind of touched on it on the cost as well, but what about time? What is the time implementation?
The time is going to be the piece that's a little bit harder, because once you got your podcast recorded, now specifically, Anchor has a decent little podcast editor embedded in their software, and it works pretty well. But the reality is, if you're going to be going for something professional that you want to do every week, you're probably going to invest in some kind of software to actually edit your podcast. And there's a couple of them out there. The one I'm using right now, and we're not getting sponsored for this, the one I'm using right now to record is Hindenburg. And I'll probably, since I like the way the audio files sound in Hindenburg, it does a lot of the leveling for you. I will take this and take the file and import it over to Adobe Audition to do a little bit of fine tuning on it. But realistically, the one that you need to get on is free for right now for beginners. It's called Audacity, and Audacity is free, and it's an audio editor, and it's on Mac and PC. It's open source, so the community develops it, and so you can get started with it. It's not as powerful as like Adobe Audition or in Hindenburg or anything like that, but it's a free alternative to get you started, and it's available on Mac or PC.
Okay. So someone wants to start a podcast.
Yeah.
What can they do? Who should they contact, Bryon?
So if you want to get launched with a podcast, you can contact I Sell Words. We can help you from conception to production to marketing. We can get you launched, and we'll sit down and have a consultation with you to figure out what your vision is and start constructing the show. And it takes all of the other guesswork out of it, because we'll handle the editing, we'll handle, some of the planning, we will handle the marketing piece of it, figuring out what social media channels you need to be on so that you can have a top flight podcast launched. And we try to aim for a 4-week window to get you from beginning to your first show rolling out.
Okay. And so how should they reach us to get that consultation set up?
The email address is mail, that's MAIL, at isellwords.net. You'll find the link, the email address in the show notes, and you can just reach out to us and we can sit down and talk about what your podcasting future looks like.
Okay.
All right.
So can I ask another question?
Yeah.
So someone starts a podcast and all of a sudden they have hit pod fade. What is pod fade?
Pod fade is where you're not exactly seeing, because here's the thing, it does take a while to start building out your audience and building out your messages. And your first couple of podcasts you're not going to be happy with them. It's just how it goes. And so it takes a while to get your voice and get your format down and get used to talking to a microphone and talking to an audience. And the reality is, once you get past that point where it gets more comfortable to you, then you start looking at your returns. You're like, oh, people aren't listening and blah, blah, blah. The reality is people are listening, but you have to go through the process of building the audience. Pod fade occurs when you're right there in that middle point where you're comfortable talking to the microphone, but your audience isn't growing as fast as you want it to. And life starts happening. It starts getting in the way. And it becomes tedious to actually sit down and have editing sessions. It becomes tedious to actually have to do all the marketing yourself. It becomes tedious to have to write show notes every single week. And so you start finding ways to avoid it. and
keep on.
and then you start fading off from doing it. So your once a month podcast ends up becoming once every 2 months, and then once every 6 months, and once every 8 months.
Until you fade out of existence?
Until you fade away. Now, you can always come back to it. And lots of podcasters take hiatuses for whatever reason. But it's where you start it and never come back to it.
Okay. So would you say one of the things someone should be committed and ready to go with if they're going to start a podcast is maybe a commitment of how many they are planning to do within their first quote unquote season? Would you suggest that?
I would absolutely suggest that. And I know that people want to get really gung-ho and say, I'm going to come in every week and record. Why don't you start out as a consultant? I would say, let's aim for once a month.
Okay.
And then as you start getting more comfortable with it, specifically if you're going to be handling all the editing and stuff yourself, I would say once a month. That gives you, you record 1 week, edit the next week, create the marketing the next week, and then post on that last week. It allows you to create more of a schedule for yourself. That's a little bit easier to do. The fastest way to burn yourself out is do something that you're not 100% sure of every single week and put that expectation on yourself. I would say you can scale up as it becomes easier to you, because as it becomes easier to you, realistically, editing piece gets a lot faster. You can edit a podcast. You go from it taking 2 or 3 hours to edit one to being able to knock one out in 45 minutes.
Okay. So from that, what I've gathered so far is be committed to whatever part of the podcasting piece that you want, whether it's you recording it and handing it off to someone to edit and transcribe like ISO Words. Email us at mail@isowords.net, or you do it all on your own. You have to be committed to doing this or creating your podcast, or you will basically put it off.
Yeah, and you'll fade away.
Okay.
Here's the thing I want to throw out there. I need to really emphasize this. It's really important. Buy storage. Buy a remote hard, a portable hard drive or something, so that storage doesn't become a concern for you, because it will. Audio files are not the smallest things. And if you're going to do the video podcasting, video takes up a lot of space. You're not going to want to bog down your computer by overwhelming it. So pay $100, get you a little portable hard drive that attaches to your computer and expands your storage. Because the worst thing is to be sitting there recording and then your computer tells you it's full.
Yeah.
So you're going to want to have some kind of storage option. And then as you start getting more complex with it, you start getting remote, network attached storage units and things like that, where you can have, 100 terabytes, available of space. But
okay.
you scale up to those. Those are like that, a couple $1,000 solutions. Go with the $100 one and get yourself some storage. Can we do video real quick? Can I mention video before I go to the next part?
Sure. Bryon.
Yes.
Speak on video podcasting, please.
So the video podcasting, the difference is basically you're talking to a camera. And here's the reality, y'all. Every person pretty much nowadays, if you got a smartphone, you have a camera that works. You have a camera that's good enough to actually do video podcasting with. All you need is a little microphone. You can buy, a little Rode Video Gold, attach it to your mic. Attach it to your camera. There are ones that attach wirelessly with Bluetooth. There's some that go into headphone jacks. But getting a microphone for your camera, getting a microphone for your
smartphone?
Your smartphone is a good way to get started. And all you need is a microphone and a tripod, and you can be in the video podcasting world. Now, with the video podcasting piece of it, that allows you to take advantage of places like YouTube, and actually Spotify is actually moving into the video podcasting realm. Now you have the visual component of it. Your messages can be a little bit shorter, because videos are short attention span theater, but you can also record one long podcast and then chunk it up into little video segments and repurpose those. The video podcast gives you a little bit more reach, but plus it allows you to reach 2 different audiences. Some people put on YouTube videos and don't even watch the video, they just listen to what's being said. That's a podcast. Some people will just put it on that's some people will put it on in the car and listen to it.
Okay.
But the power of it is a video on YouTube has more discoverability than your basic podcast because Google owns YouTube. YouTube results are indexed into Google. So when you do searches, if your video it has the right keywords, it will be found. It will be discovered by somebody who's looking for a solution. And the reality is people go to YouTube to either be entertained or to find an answer to a question.
True.
And so if you're answering the right questions and you're positioned the right way, you're opening yourself up to billions, depending on what your business is. You're opening yourself up to billions of potential clients. Because think of how many people Google stuff on a day-to-day basis.
I was just Googling before we started this episode.
So video podcasting is the next frontier. And it's so important that YouTube is actually building tools for podcasters on their platform. And so you want to be, if you're going to be in this is a good chance to get on the wave before it starts. And have your video podcasting wing of your business up and running and turning out content. Because that's the last piece we're going to talk about with the importance of podcasting. You're going to want to have it up and running and turning out content so that you can be ahead of the people that discover this 5 years from now.
Okay. So to highlight what we've spoken on thus far, we've spoken on the facts that there are multiple ways to podcast, audio podcasts, video podcasts. We've talked about how to implement the podcast, things and tools and equipment that you can utilize. And one of the easiest things is just start off with your smartphone. We've talked about time commitment and the aspect of, are you doing it all yourself, or are you having someone come in and do at least your editing and possible posting for it?
Someone like who?
Someone like I Sell Words.
All right, go ahead.
And we've talked about how you can step up your game and be ahead of the curve by doing video podcasting in the realm of not just audio, how it can be versatile because someone can put it on in their car and listen to it while not necessarily watching it.
Right.
Is there anything that we've missed, Bryon?
I think the big thing is the big dangling question that hangs over all of this is the why. Well, why podcasting for marketing? The why is
podcasting for marketing for what?
For businesses and organizations.
Okay.
The thorn in a lot of businesses' sides, the thorn in a lot of organization sides is creating content that connects with their audience. They outsource it. They hire people. They pay for content mills that create content specific to their industry, and they never quite connect with the audience, and they spend lots of time and money on this stuff. And it's not information that engages the audience in the way that they want to engage them. And then they feel like they're wasting their money.
So, Bryon.
Yeah.
Does this spin back to any of our previous episodes?
I believe it does. Which one is it, dude?
I believe it spins back to creating a client avatar.
It absolutely does.
Oh, okay.
It goes back. And if you want to learn more about it, then you need to jump back a couple episodes and check out our client avatar episode.
And also, Bryon, would you say in the aspect of creating a podcast for your business, the solopreneur, the entrepreneur, the nonprofit organization, who knows your client better than you do?
Right.
Okay.
So, and that's the point. Your podcasts can be the questions you get the most. You have a treasure trove of podcasts that you can create over your most frequently asked questions of your clients, and you're entering the conversation that they already have. But it removes the barrier because it may seem like it's time consuming, but really your podcast is a conversation with your audience. And if you decide that you want to outsource it, all it is you just creating the audio or video files and sending them over to somebody, and they put them together. And now you have a piece of content that you can use for a long, long time. You can repurpose it time and time again. But it's as simple as your content creation strategy, as simple as talking into a mic and answering questions that your clients have. It doesn't get much simpler than that. And that's why it makes your content creation a lot simpler.
Okay.
You don't have to write no articles.
No blogging.
No blogging.
However,
it can benefit you.
Is blogging a good tool you could use if you already have a blog to create podcast episodes?
Absolutely.
How?
You can use the blog that you started and forgot about. You wrote 12 articles for. Those are 12 podcast episodes. And you can do a combination of both. If you're looking at saving your time, podcasting is a great way to create one long piece of content. You book out a Saturday or Sunday and just record.
That's kind of what we did today.
Right. And you just record. And then you can chop that up into multiple episodes. You can make it one long episode and then chop it up into little bite-sized segments that you post on social media. But what you're doing is you're showing the world that you're an expert in your space. And create it once, post it forever. That's what a podcast does. And it allows people to listen to you at their own pace, at their own leisure, while they're doing other activities. It's not an interruption. It's not you interrupting them while they're browsing the internet.
You're not picking up the phone call to try and get them as a client.
Right.
You're not cold calling.
They are showing a higher level of intent and engagement by listening to your episode and getting their question answered. So it's a faster, more efficient way to create content. Once you get everything set up, again, we're not gonna sugarcoat it for you. It does require sweat equity. Either you're gonna put in the sweat equity or you're gonna put in the cash equity. But one of the two, either you're going to pay with effort or you're going to pay with money, but it does yield fantastic results. And it can be an entity that makes money by itself.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a vehicle if you are, I keep going back to air conditioning and HVAC. If you are a mechanic, the brands you use, if you got a big enough audience, they will pay to advertise their services on your podcast.
I think we keep going back to those is because we have a couple of guests on the line that will be coming into recording that are in these industries in some way. So look forward to those industries that we've kind of mentioned and utilized.
Right. I mean, I'll name them. I'm not going to name off the specific businesses. We'll introduce them when it comes in. But we have friends that run HVAC companies. I have a friend that details cars. I got a friend that does speed and agility training. We have family members that run a restaurant.
So we got some people lined up for y'all. Friends that run small nonprofit organizations.
Right. Friends that run large nonprofit.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of different voices that you guys are going to want to hear on What's the Business. So hopefully that answered your questions. If you guys have any further questions regarding getting started with your podcast, the link is in the show notes. I am very serious about this. Email us and we can set up a time so that we can meet and discuss what your vision is for your podcast in the future. We think it's a fantastic marketing opportunity that a lot of businesses are not up on yet. You want to be ahead of the curve.
All right. Well, you guys can contact us to schedule a consultation at mail@isellwords.net. And the link is in the show notes.
And if you want to see what our podcast packages are,
you can visit our website
at
www.isellwords.net.
All right.
Anything further you have for our people today, Bryon?
No, that's all. If you got questions, hit us up and we'll be glad to answer them on the air. And that's all we got. So thanks for tuning in. Thank you for your time. And again, it's Bryon and Brandi, and we're asking you,
what's the business? Bye.
Peace.